Welcome everyone to the second part of risk assessment lecture. Today we are going to discuss how to carry out risk assessment. It's really an important topic and we will cover in detail and completely the risk assessment. In this lecture we will basically see that how we can perform risk assessment in practical steps. So performing risk assessments need these 6 steps. We have to perform these 6 steps in order to perform risk assessments. First one is listing work task, second one is identifying the risks, third one is estimating the risks, then evaluating the risks, and in the 5th step we have to record our findings, and lastly we will review our findings. So first, listing the work task. In order to perform risk assessment, we have to we have to list what we are going to do in the risk assessment. Like first we have to think about our location, like the worker, for example, are working in a specific location, they are doing a task in that location, so we need to know that location for the risk assessment. So first we have to point out the location, then we will need to know about the people working in that location. Those people might be the safety workers, those may be the line managers, safety personnel, different workers, people in the workforce environment. Then we have to think about the equipment with which workers are working. Those may be ladders, different machineries and different kind of things in the workforce environment. So we have to think about the equipment with which the workers are basically working. Then we have to think about what activities the workers are performing in the workforce area. It's also really important that what basically they are doing. They may be doing any kind of activities which are in the workforce environment, so we have to list this as well. Now we have listed all the things, like for example the location, the workers, the area and the activities. So we have listed our task for the workforce environment. Now we have to identify our risks. Like we have to think as a safety personnel that what are the risks and what are the which we have to identify while doing our work. So for this we have to think about 3 things. First one is what are the present hazards, like what are the hazards in the workforce environment. We have to think about it and visualize it. Then we have to see that who might get harmed from those hazards, like the workers, line managers, different kind of working people in the environment. So we have to think about like how they might be get harmed as well. Like for example, if the worker is working on the ladder, he may fall from the top, so this is the way that he may get harmed. So the ladder is basically a hazard in that case. So identifying the risk basically needs to think about the present hazards in the workforce environment. Basically every task has some kind of hazard with it, so it may basically harm the worker and it may harm them in some or other ways. Now in the 3rd step we have to estimate the risk. Like we have to do some kind of estimation that how much the risks are there in the workforce environment related with a specific activity. So we have to think about 2 things while estimating the risk. First one is how likely or what is the likelihood that something could go in the wrong direction. Like we have to think that what are the chances that there might be some basically wrong things to happen in the workforce environment. If the worker is for example working with a ladder, what is the likelihood that he may fall from the ladder? What is the likelihood that ladder may break down? What are some of the other hazards? So we have to think about the likelihood of something bad to happen. We have to visualize this first, and if something bad happened, what are the repercussions or what is the outcome from those bad accident or incident. For example, we have to say that if if the repercussion is very high, then the likelihood would be more and the outcome would be really dangerous. So we have to think about the likelihood of something that could go in the wrong direction and the repercussions or the outcome from those likelihood of those wrong directions event. So we have to think about the likelihood and the outcome. Estimating risk basically means that what is the likelihood of the wrong things to happen and what is the outcome from those wrong event. Now, estimating the risk basically need two things. First one is likelihood and the second one is consequences. If we think about the likelihood, then it might be low, it might be medium, it might be high. What does it mean? It means that there might be a very low chances, there might be a very medium chances, and there might be a very high chances of something to go in the wrong direction. For example, we can say that falling from the ladder might have a low likelihood, it might have a medium likelihood, and it might have a very high likelihood. Now, on what it depends that it might have a low, medium or high likelihood. For example, if a ladder is a very supportive ladder and safe ladder, then the chances are or the likelihood are very low from falling from that ladder. But if it's not that much good, then the chances or the likelihood from falling from that ladder might be medium. And if suppose the ladder is broken in some places, then there is of course a very high chances for the worker to fall down from the ladder. So we can say that from low to high it's increasing likelihood. It's basically estimating our risk, that how we can calculate our risk, and it's an estimation of something. So estimating risk is done in that way. Now, if something has the likelihood, it may also have a consequences. For example, the consequences may be low, it might be medium, or it might be high. For example, if the worker is working on the top of the ladder and if he fall down, then of course the consequences will be high. If he is working in the middle and fall down, in that case the consequences may be medium. And if he is working very below the ladder, then in that case the consequences may be very low. So it's a kind of increasing consequences or outcome. Now, estimating risk takes two things: increasing likelihood and increasing consequences. Now, this is the case. For example, we have discussed before. For example, this is a kind of ladder, okay, and the worker is working on that ladder. If the worker is working on the top and he fall down, then in that case the consequences of the risk might be high. But if he is working in the middle, then in that case, and fall down, then in that case the consequences is medium. And if he is working very below, then in that case the consequences are really low. So the high consequences is more dangerous than the low and the medium, and the medium is more dangerous than the low. Now, how we can calculate the increasing likelihood? Like for example, there are three kind of ladders you can see in the picture. The first one is really a safe ladder, and the next one is a bit good than the third one, and you can see that the third ladder is broken on the top, in the second top step. So in that case, if the worker fall down from this, like for example, you can say that the likelihood is low in that case than the high and the medium. Why? Because there are very less chances that in this case the worker may fall down, because it's a really safe ladder. So the likelihood is less in that case. This is a not more good ladder, but it's better than the third one because it's not broken. So here the likelihood is medium, and in the last the likelihood is more high because it's broken and there are more chances that the worker will fall down from the ladder and there might be an injury. So we have to like calculate in the chart form the risk. Estimating the risk might take this shape: increasing consequences 1, 2 and 3, and increasing likelihood 1, 2 and 3. Here the likelihood is more and here the consequences is more. So as we go from this side to the right direction, and from the below to top, the likelihood and the consequences increases. So here on the one spot the risk is very low. Here on the second it's more than the first one, and on the yellow spot it's more than the second one, and the 6 and 9 is more high than the rest of the ones. So we can say that here the risk is more than this location, and we can say that here the risk is more than this location. The 4 have the more risk than the first one. Now we have estimated the risk. Now we have to evaluate it. Evaluation means that we have to given it some solid values to those locations. We have to identify it in the words. So identifying it in the words takes the form of evaluating it. For example, on the first and the second location, the risk is acceptable. What does it mean? No further action needed, but ensures that control are maintained. Like on the first and second location, the risk is very low, so it doesn't need any further action, but we have to opt for our controls methods, safety methods we will discuss in the next lectures. On the second and up to 4 location, it's tolerable, like we can improve it, we have to improve it. But on the 6 up to 9 location, it's not acceptable, and we have to take rapid action in order to improve it. Now you can see that the increasing likelihood, it's first, second, third, 4 and 5th location. There is basically 5 location. We can say that here the risk is very unlikely on the first location. On the second it's unlikely. On the third it's fairly likely that there are risk. On the fourth there is likely a chances of risk. On the 5th location very likely. So we can basically evaluate and given names to the likelihood of the risk. Now we can evaluate the consequences as the increasing consequences here as well. 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. We can say that on the first location the consequences from the risk is insignificant. On the second location we can say that the consequences is minor. On the third it's moderate. On the 4 it's major, and on the 5th it's catastrophic and really dangerous. Now you can say that there is basically on the 1 and the 4 it's acceptable. Your risk is basically acceptable, no further action needed, but ensure that controls are maintained in place. On the 5th and 9th location it's adequate, like we have to improve it in the next review. Remember that you have to evaluate and you have to review your risk assessment as well. On the 10th and 16th locations it's tolerable, improve it in the given or decided time scale. You have to improve it and give it a specific time scale, and you have to improve it in that time duration. On the 17 and 25 you can see that the activity should be stopped and improved immediately. In that case we have to not work, and the work should be stopped immediately. So this is a kind of evaluating our risk. We have given some values and some names in order to do a work or improve it, or doing a work or doing not. Like we have to we have to decide that in that case we can work, in that case we can also work, in that case in tolerable case we have to improve it, and in the unacceptable case we do not have to work. Now in the second last step we have to record our findings, what we have done in the risk assessment. For example, we have seen the location, what activity we are performing, and the assessment of the equipments, what equipments the workers are basically working with. We have to list all these things. Then we have to list the hazards and risk levels we have discussed before. We have to identify what are the hazards, what are the risk levels, Then we have to risk controls. We have to take certain actions, certain risk control methods in order to basically control our risks. Then we have to opt for the assessor details. Assessors mean that who is basically doing the risk assessment, date and time of the risk assessment, and the most important, the review date details, like when you are reviewing your risk assessment. Why we need to review our risk assessment, we will see in the next slide. Basically, reviewing your findings or reviewing your risk assessment happen when alteration occurs, such as personnel, equipment, or activities. You should review your risk assessment. In that case, for example, if the specific activity got changed, if the personnel working with that activity got changed, or the equipment got changed, then you have to revise or review your risk assessment. It is legally required to review risk assessment in the above case. So guys, this was about the risk assessment. If you have any question, then ask me in the comment section. I will answer your all queries. Thank you so much. Take care and bye.